Hello, Catherine.
Hello.
Hello, Monique.
Hi.
Hi, I'm not your host, but I'm just here to check everything's okay. But if you have some questions, you can ask me.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure something out. Yeah. Hold on, give me a second here.
No problem.
Do I have the ability to do a poll as the conference, as a speaker?
In what sense? Like, what kind of poll would you like to do?
Like a Zoom poll. Like, can I, like, or is that only the host would be able to do that?
I think only the host would be able to do that. I'm just gonna try. I don't think I can.
I'm just curious about what level of interaction I'm able to have with the participants.
So
like, is there any direct?
There is a Q&A, there's a live Q&A. So as the participants they are watching, they can ask questions in a live Q&A, and your host, Catherine, will pick the popular questions and then she'll ask them to you at the end. That's what should happen there.
Okay.
But otherwise, it will be more of a, you will be presenting. And I don't think you can use the poll because I don't think you can be host of this session. I'm not sure about that.
So if I want to, like, for example, could I send the host a link in the chat to like a Google form that then the participants can fill out?
I understand. No, no, that wouldn't be possible, unfortunately. So in this session, you'll only really be able to interact with Catherine and any other presenter, but not really with the actual attendees, the audience.
But say, for example, the presenter sent the link. Like, I'm not going to send it myself, but if I send it to her and then she sends it to them, then that would be a way to like, then
right,
you know,
like in a shared Google, Google Sheets thing.
Yeah.
I guess that
yeah.
I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't work. Yeah, we could do that because we could just put that as a question, and I'm not sure how many people would see that and know how to interact with that, but we could just certainly try. Do you have any other questions right now?
No, that was mainly it, just because there was a real emphasis on like interaction and not talking too much, but I don't really see how that's possible just given the formatting. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna I'm actually going to try to call Catherine to see where she is, because maybe did you speak to Catherine before the session?
No, I wasn't actually. I don't think I was put in touch with her at any point, so no.
Okay, so just give me a moment. I'm gonna try and get in touch with Catherine for you.
Okay.
Monique. So we can't get in touch with Catherine, so I'm not sure where she is. So I'm going to stay on the session and I'm going to host the session. So do you want to send me, if you had the link for, is that Monique?
Oui, je suis là. Je suis là.
Oh, you're here. Okay. Did you have any questions before the start of the session, Catherine?
Is Monique would like to have the question during the session, or she will ask me if I have some question by the public question?
Monique?
Veux-tu le dire en français?
Excuse-moi, Monique, je pensais que tu étais anglophone, désolée.
Non, c'est correct.
Est-ce que vous aimeriez les questions au fur et à mesure qu'elles m'arrivent, ou vous allez me poser la question, est-ce qu'il y a des questions, puis moi je vais vous les transférer?
Ouais, je pense que c'est mieux comme ça je ne serai pas comme toute distraite. Ouais.
Oh, elle est déconnectée.
Do you know, Catherine, do you know how to take the session live?
Yes.
You do? Okay, all good.
Okay. I transferred the co-host to Monique.
Yeah, so you can do that. And are you able to, you know how to use the live question and answer?
Yeah, it's working now. I tried it before and it was some problem with the platform, but during the presentation, everything was fine.
Perfect, excellent. So do you have any questions for me, or should I leave you to do your session?
No, everything seems to be okay. If I'd like to have the number of participants of the event, do you know how I can have this number?
The number of, what's that, sorry?
Of people who's assisting to the presentation.
So you can communicate them. The only way to communicate with them would be to post a question yourself and make it the active question, and everybody can see that, but otherwise it's not possible to interact with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yes.
So I'll leave you to it, so have a great session.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Donc, Monique, est-ce que vous avez des questions pour... Oui?
Oui, je suis désolée, j'avais fermé, j'avais pas vu encore. Au fait, c'est ça. Moi, j'ai parlé un peu avec, je ne sais pas c'est quoi son nom, mais en tout cas, la personne qui vient de partir. Parce que c'est ça, apparemment, il n'y a pas vraiment de possibilité d'interaction à part ce qui peut se faire à travers votre chat avec les participants.
Oui, c'est ça.
Comme moi, je ne peux pas... Ouais, fait que du coup, moi, au fait... c'est ça, fait qu'on ne peut pas vraiment faire de genre de Zoom poll ou quoi que ce soit.
Non, il n'y a pas moyen de les intégrer dans la présentation. Là.
Ouais,
on dirait que c'est
ça.
Ouais, la plateforme est assez
moi, je pose des
limitée.
questions. Oui, c'est ça. Hein? Genre, si je pose des questions à savoir, est-ce que les gens sont de où? Est-ce qu'eux, ils peuvent chatter, mais après, c'est comme à vous de tout transférer comme un à un? Ou
Oui, ils peuvent le transmettre dans le chat, puis moi, je peux vous donner les réponses.
OK. On va voir comment ça fonctionne. Parce que j'ai aussi comme une partie... une partie plus comme qui était censée être interactive. Mais en tout cas, on verra. Parce que j'ai aussi un Google Forms que j'ai créé. Parce que je me disais, si je vous envoie le lien, comme ça, vous pourrez le partager, puis les gens pourront peut-être le remplir.
Oui, on pourrait peut-être le partager on pourrait peut-être essayer le chat si ça fonctionne, mais pour l'instant, donc la présentation... Oui, on est live. La présentation, elle est débutée. Donc, si vous voulez partager votre écran avec tout le monde, est-ce que vous savez comment?
Oui, ça ne sera pas long. Je vais juste...
Donc, en attendant, je peux vous présenter. On est aujourd'hui dans l'activité nous versus eux, créer l'autre, avec Monique McLeod qui va vous parler vous êtes du musée de l'Holocauste, donc situé à Montréal. Oui. Donc, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas. Je vais transférer les questions à la présentatrice. Merci beaucoup et bonne séance.
Catherine, est-ce que tout est beau? Vous voyez le PowerPoint?
Non, on n'a pas votre... Ah, OK, oui. C'est bien.
OK, c'est en mode présentation maintenant. OK,
oui.
Super. So this session is in English, if I'm not mistaken. That's right, Catherine? And do we have translation happening?
It's supposed to be.
Okay, great. So fingers crossed that that's working. So hello, everyone. My name is Monique McLeod, and I'm the head of education at the Montreal Holocaust Museum. It's a pleasure to be here today as part of the first joint OHASTA MSSTA and ACUS annual conference, teaching history and social studies in the time of COVID, and especially for my fellow Montrealers and maybe Quebecers who are here today. Thank you so much. It's an incredible day. It's 20 degrees and you've chosen to be here together. So thank you so much for being here. Before we get started, of course, we wanted to begin with a land acknowledgement. So the Montreal Holocaust Museum is located in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, on unceded Indigenous lands, which are the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, who are the keepers of the eastern door of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, has historically been known as a gathering place for many First Nations, and today it's home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. And at the museum, we are mindful of this history and the way it impacts the present as we engage in our mission to raise awareness about racism, anti-Semitism, hate, and indifference. So maybe we can do a little test, Catherine, of some interaction. So I'm wondering if anyone who's here today has visited the Montreal Holocaust Museum in person, or whether you've used some of our online resources before.
There's no response,
No response
for now.
Is anyone here?
Yes, I do.
We know that there are some people here. This is good news.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just in the eventuality that that folks haven't been to the museum before, I just wanted to give you a little introduction and a little bit of a view into our world. Since the museum is closed anyway and no one can come in person, this is increasingly the way that we're accessing things. So the mission of the Montreal Holocaust Museum is to educate people of all ages and backgrounds about the Holocaust, while sensitizing the public to the universal perils of anti-Semitism, racism, hatred, and indifference. So through exhibitions, commemorative programs, and educational initiatives, the Montreal Holocaust Museum promotes respect for diversity and the sanctity of human life. And the museum was founded in 1976 by Holocaust survivors and members of the Montreal Jewish community, and it opened its doors to the public as a museum institution in 1979. So here you can see a selection of our artifacts, some of our key artifacts. There are actually over 400 of them in our permanent exhibition. And as you can see here, it holds more than 400 artifacts, documents, and oral histories from survivors who share their experiences before, during, and after the Second World War. And we have the largest collection of artifacts and testimonies related to the Holocaust in Canada. Here is one of our most well-known and beloved artifacts, the Heart from Auschwitz. And if you want to learn more about it, I invite you to visit our website, where we have featured objects from the collection, from the exhibition, and more information about all of them. So at the museum, we offer a wide range of programming. So we offer, in normal times, guided tours of our permanent exhibition, visits, encounters with survivors, As you can see here, we have a range of traveling exhibitions that schools or cultural organizations can borrow and set up in their own spaces. We also have numerous virtual exhibitions, which have taken on a whole new meaning in this COVID time, that you can explore in the classroom, at home. They're accessible from anywhere, and many of them have accompanying pedagogical resources and activities. Here's another one of them. We also offer extensive teacher training, whether it's in person at the museum, at teachers' conferences like today, or through our biennial teacher seminar, which is a biennial 3-day event in Montreal, where we welcome teachers from across the country to come together and to think about teaching the Holocaust, teaching human rights. We're hoping to be holding our next one in 2021. Whether it will be in person or virtual, we can all guess, but we're hoping to be able to do that with all of you next year. And we also offer a wide range of other programs, public programs, that address a wide range of topics covering the Holocaust and human rights. So here are a few recent examples of events that are now still going on, although virtually. In terms of education, as I mentioned before, we do teacher training and we do programs for schools, but we also have a huge amount of resources available online on our website that I really invite you to explore. And I'll be talking to you about one of those resources in more detail shortly. That is the Us versus Them project. But just a brief overview of what our resources look like online. As you can see, you can explore by grade level. These are some of the educational programs that, that are available, complete lesson plans and extensive historical documentation. We also have online timelines that you can use with your students that follow a few different themes. And we have interactive maps as well, so that you can see the shifting borders and zones of occupation and other events during the Holocaust. And as you can imagine, with the closure of museums and with just the restrictions that are in place right now, we, like so many other institutions, have pivoted and are now offering all of our formerly in-person programs virtually. And we're seeing this as a blessing in disguise, because it means that for all of our, all of you who are from Ontario or from Manitoba, or even from further areas in Quebec, you are now able to access our programs in a way that was never available before. So we are now offering a virtual guided tour that you can see a few excerpts from here that explores the history of the Holocaust through artifacts, through testimony excerpts, and recounts the story of the Jewish communities before, during, and after World War II. We are also offering, here's a little glimpse of our French workshop for elementary school students. We're offering workshops, interactive workshops for our school groups. And we're also offering virtual testimony. It's live, it's with survivors like Angie here. And they are available to meet with your students and give their testimony and answer questions. And many of them have followed us into this new virtual realm with a lot of enthusiasm, and we speak to them regularly, and they are waiting. They are just wanting to be speaking with classes. So if any of you are interested, please reach out through our website and reserve a testimony, a workshop, a virtual tour. It would be such a pleasure to connect with you in a way that's never been possible before. So, and I just wanted to mention that I heard Angie's testimony for the first time this week. She has an incredible story. She is one of the 2 people who was born in Auschwitz. And so I really highly recommend that you connect with us and give your students the opportunity to experience a testimony. These students are the last generation who will have this experience. It's, it's a unique opportunity. So without further ado, I am going to get into talking to you about the project called Us versus Them. And this is a pedagogical tool, a teaching guide that was developed in collaboration with the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg. Some of you may have attended their session this morning. I know they were presenting. And so it's called Us versus Them, Creating the Other. And it explores the relationship between othering, human rights violations, and the process of genocide. So this project is an educational guide that provides 4 different classroom modules. And through these modules, participants analyze artifacts, like you can see here on your screen. They analyze timelines, they analyze survivor testimonies from 2 case studies of genocide, as you can see here. We're talking about the Holocaust and the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar. So by having students reflect on how the process of othering has been used by dominant groups to facilitate the exclusion of, discrimination against, and persecution of minority groups, participants come to understand that genocide cannot take place without this initial stage of othering. So today we'll be looking at both these examples, historical and contemporary cases of othering that led to genocide. But the goal is also to reflect more broadly on othering that we see within our society and communities, and think about ways to take action against it. So what is othering? This may be a word that you're familiar with. I know that in French, the term altérisation, I'll throw that out there for our translator in case they're wondering. That's the word that we use in our French version of this program. And so we talk about altérisation, or othering. The definition that we work with is as follows. So othering is a process whereby a group of people is made to seem fundamentally different, even to the point of making that group seem less than human. This process can trigger instinctive emotional reactions towards members of that group. And in many instances, othering has been used to degrade, to alienate, and to render possible the discrimination, abuse, or persecution of that group. So let's unpack that a little bit. Obviously, people are different, and we can use our differences as an opportunity to share and to learn from each other, or as an excuse to build walls between us. So when we highlight differences between groups of people to increase suspicion of them, to insult them, or to exclude them, we are going down the path known as othering. So othering involves zeroing in on a difference and then using that difference to dismantle a sense of similarity or connectedness between people. So othering sets the stage for discrimination or persecution by reducing empathy and preventing any kind of genuine dialogue. So taken to an extreme, as in the cases that we're studying today, othering can result in one group denying the humanity of another. As humans, of course, we have this cognitive bias, right, towards categorizing, due to the fact that our brain can only process a limited amount of information at any one time. As anyone who has small children will know only too well. So what happens is that when faced with overwhelming amounts of information, we sort that information according to categories that can easily be recognized. So these categories and these identifiers are socially constructed. So othering starts with this social and cognitive process, but then it operates in 2 steps, as you can see here. So the first step is to categorize a person or a group of people according to perceived differences. And these are the socially constructed identifiers. So this process in and of itself, let's be clear, it's not inherently discriminatory. It's something that we as humans do all the time in order to make sense of the world around us, right? But it's the second step that takes othering into the territory of discrimination. Where things become problematic is when we label one of these groups that has been categorized based on perceived differences as inferior, and then, categorized based on perceived differences as inferior, and then we use an us versus them mentality to isolate the group. So othering is therefore not simply the grouping of people according to differences. So for example, distinguishing Christians from Muslims or Jews from Christians. Othering takes place when we treat the minority group as being radically different and inferior to our group. So we no longer perceive individuals as having their own particularities, their own ideas, their own desires. but rather as this sort of undifferentiated mass, the other. So othering is a process which leads to the negation of the humanity of others, and which then facilitates their marginalization and discrimination. There's a whole relational dynamics to othering, which we can understand by taking into account the conceptual couple othering and belonging. So those who are other do not belong to the we. So othering is not just creating an other, it's also creating a we that this other does not belong to. So it's creating a we that is exclusive. So we no longer, so to be clear, the problem lies in the othering, not in the difference itself, or even in the recognition of difference. So for example, there's nothing wrong with saying that there are Jews who are Germans, or that some Germans identify as Jews. The problem is when Jews are defined as not being German, as not belonging to the dominant group, and as being inherently inferior to this group, which then justifies discrimination against them and the violation of their human rights. So we can look a little more closely at the definitions of these two terms, discrimination and human rights. I'll let everyone read for a few moments and give myself a break and a drink.
Actually, there is no question here.
Oh, there is a question?
Nope, everything is good.
No, okay, yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so I'm just sharing this part here. So now we can see the two definitions of discrimination and human rights. And so now that we have a better understanding of what othering is and how it operates, now we can turn to the big question, which is, what is its relationship with genocide? So why is it important to talk about othering and genocide? How are they connected? So first of all, genocides don't happen overnight. Genocide is an incremental process of escalating discrimination and persecution that follows well-documented steps. The academic Gregory H. Stanton developed a tool called the 10 stages of genocide that identify these different steps, and which we won't go into detail about here, but I recommend you look up or consult some of our resources. And I do invite you to look further at it if you're interested in learning more about the process of genocide beyond this initial step of othering. So I want to draw your attention to this artifact, which is a ballot for the second round of the presidential election in Germany in 1932. So here we see three candidates. You might recognize the middle one. Keep this ballot in mind when we move to our next slide, please. So in June 2019, the UN called for a renewed commitment by member states to combat hate speech. The Secretary General highlighted that hate speech is more virulent than ever, more prevalent and more malicious. So Adama Dieng, the Secretary General's special advisor on the prevention of genocide, also underlined that hate crimes began with hate speech. So in other words, in order to prevent genocide, we must pay close attention and be very vigilant about the normalization of hate speech, right? That stigmatizes specific minorities and that then encourages their discrimination and persecution. We need to ensure that hate speech doesn't become so commonplace that we stop noticing it and calling it out. So the history of the Holocaust shows us that the rule of law and democracy are not absolute bulwarks against the institutionalization of racism and genocide. Democracy and human rights are fragile things. The Nazis didn't seize power by a coup d'etat, right? They were voted into power through democratic elections. This history shows us that dictatorship can emerge from within a democracy to suppress rights and freedoms. Note the ballot here. This is from the 1936 federal elections in Germany. So, without saying that history repeats itself, studying the past makes it possible for us to understand the ongoing importance of defending democracy and the rights it provides us with. In particular, when it comes to politicians who are democratically elected, but who use their positions of power to legitimize othering and the subsequent discrimination against minorities. So this project, Us versus Them, looks at the relationship between othering, discrimination, and human rights abuses by studying two situations of genocide: the Holocaust and the situation of the Rohingya in Myanmar. The Rohingya being a Muslim minority that is a victim of genocide by the Buddhist authorities. So, like all historical events, each genocide is unique and particular, but they are all human productions, and by comparing them, we can better understand them. And by using tools like the 10 stages of genocide that I mentioned earlier, we can also understand these recurring patterns that they all follow. So a comparative approach requires a thorough study of each case and an analysis of the unique historical context of each genocide. So it's not about saying that two genocides are the same, or that the same thing we're seeing today happened 75 years ago. Nor is it ever about creating any kind of hierarchy of human suffering. It's really rather about analyzing the similarities and the differences and understanding the shared human experience. So the way that we'll do this today is to take a closer look at both recent and historical events through the lens of their impact on ordinary people, which we can access through their testimonies. So before we dive into these testimonies, I'd like to spend a few minutes just situating each of the genocides that we're looking at today, looking at the specific social, political, and economic conditions that made them possible. An extreme example of othering and its consequences is found in the Holocaust, the systematic persecution and murder of 6 million Jews, organized by Nazi Germany and its collaborators from 1933 to 1945. So some of you might be wondering, oh wait, 33, just a sec. So at the museum, we consider the beginning of the Holocaust to be 1933, so the moment of Hitler's rise to power, which is really when the othering and the discriminations began, so until the end of World War II. And of course, in addition to committing genocide against the Jews, the Nazis also committed genocide against the Roma and the Sinti people, and many other groups, including people with disabilities, homosexuals, Slavic peoples, political opponents, Jehovah's Witnesses, were also violently persecuted during this period. So just a very quick kind of overview. Following its humiliating defeat in the First World War, Germany suffered an economic and political crisis, and had to pay reparations, and Germans really felt like this was unduly harsh, a belief that was later exploited by the Nazis, of course. So military and right-wing leaders then propagated the idea that the German army had been betrayed by the communists, liberals, and Jews, and sought to kind of put the blame for that defeat on those communities. And then during the Weimar Republic, 1919 to 1932, a series of coalition governments ruled Germany. No single political party was able to establish a parliamentary majority. And then this instability really facilitated the Nazis' rise to power in 1933, which eventually brought an end to the Weimar Republic. Nazi ideology divided humans into two categories: the so-called Aryans, the German people, whom they considered genetically superior, and the so-called inferior races, so Jews, along with Slavs, Roma and Sinti, and Black people. This ranking of some groups of people as lesser than was a process of othering that helped facilitate and create the conditions for the genocide. So following this classification, right, of individuals, a number of measures against Jews were introduced in Germany between 1933 and 1939, so in the lead up to the Second World War, including the following, and you can see here an image that represents this. Boycott of Jewish businesses, Jews can no longer work in the public service, Jews are barred from all public schools and universities, from cinemas, theaters, sports facilities, etc. And ID cards are stamped with a J. there are many others. So there's this gradual and complete exclusion of Jews from all aspects of public life. And this is how the stage is set through the use of othering for genocide. As you can see, this image is actually an image from Kristallnacht, so the state-sanctioned attack of Jewish businesses and synagogues, and burning and destruction and looting that happened on November 9th and 10th in 1938. So we will move now to our other case study, the Rohingya genocide. And I'm going to try another question. Just maybe it'll work this time. I'm just wondering how many of you have heard of this genocide before. I will have another drink while I let you answer.
There's no answer for your question now, but I have another question. Is an example of this othering the man who was stopped at the Canadian border for an extra search because he was Somalian, even though he was Canadian citizenship?
I mean, yeah, that certainly sounds like an example of it. I mean, racial profiling, right? I think that's a good example. I mean, that's a different kind of context than the genocide context. But as we were talking about, all situations of othering don't lead necessarily to genocide, but it's the necessary first stage. So it's very common, right? I think once we start thinking about it, we start seeing it all over us, all around us in our communities, in the news, and elsewhere. So yeah, thanks. That's a great thing to point out. Mm-hmm.
And I have now 4 answer yes to your question.
Oh, people, you're here. This is wonderful. It's just nice to have signs of life. Okay, great. So I'm glad to hear that folks do have some awareness of the situation, and I am by no means an expert at all on this genocide, but I will share some links later on if people are interested in having more information or in connecting with some of the Rohingya organizations in Canada, namely in Ontario. So what I forgot to mention actually, and this is my total oversight, is that this tool was actually developed in collaboration too, of course, with obviously the Jewish community that we work with through the museum, but also with the Rohingya community in Canada. And so we worked with someone named Yasmin Ullah, whose testimony you will be hearing later on, and also with numerous other members of Rohingya organizations to both redact this, not redact, that's the French word, sorry, to both produce the historical overview, but then also to source images and etc. So it was definitely done in collaboration with the community. Let me get going here. The Rohingya are a mostly Muslim majority that make up 1/3 of the population in a region of Myanmar called Rakhine State, which is also known as Burma. So if you can see Rakhine State, it's on the left side of the continent there, the yellow kind of long, narrow state that is right on the coast. And since the early 1980s, government policies have stripped the Rohingya of citizenship and enforced an apartheid-like system where they were first isolated and marginalized and then targeted for genocide. Although they have been in the region since the 15th century, Rohingya continue to be viewed by the Muslim majority as Bengali immigrants and Muslim invaders. The quotation marks here are very key. So this labeling is an example of the othering process that denies the Rohingya their status as fellow citizens, and even as human beings, as we'll see, it'll progress, right? So since 1962, the government has refused to recognize them among the country's 135 ethnic groups. So during World War II, during World War II, Japanese forces invaded Myanmar, which was a British colony until 1948. And then communal tensions between the Rohingya and then ethnic Rakhine Buddhists erupted during this time, as the Rakhine aligned themselves with the Japanese and the Rohingyas sided with the British. And then for the next 14 years, Myanmar's democratic government faced armed and social unrest before being overthrown by the army in 1962. This resulted in an oppressive military regime, and Rohingya associations were dissolved, and Rohingya were targeted as a threat to cementing this Burmese national identity. So we're hearing these echoes, right? This sounds familiar. Under the 1982 citizenship law, Rohingya Muslims were officially denied citizenship. In 2012, violence broke out in Rakhine State, killing hundreds and displacing thousands of Rohingya. And then after an attack on a border post in 2016, in which police officers were killed by Rohingya fighters, Myanmar's military launched a crackdown. The military action, which consisted of a wave of village burnings, murders, and rapes, forced hundreds of thousands of Rohingya to flee to Bangladesh. And this, I think, is when most of us started to hear about the situation for the first time, as it was really gaining international media attention through that event, that moment. And violence against Rohingya has escalated since then, leading to the acknowledgement of genocide-like crimes by the United Nations and by the Canadian government in 2018, the first government to recognize, to do so. So now that we've heard more about the specific circumstances that each genocide is located within, I wanted to stop and take a closer look at how othering affects individuals during the genocidal process. And this, I would say, maybe I can ask a little question again, since that seemed to work last time. I'm wondering how many of you have used testimonies or oral histories before in the classroom?
During the time that people are answering at your question, I have one question here. It says, can you address or comment on the Uyghurs situation in China in the context of genocide?
I mean, I'm not a, I mean, I always wonder how to comment on these things because I'm not an expert on genocide or on the stages of genocide, but I can say that the museum has been following the situation, the Uyghur situation in China for a few years now. And it's definitely concerning because, you know, as we've been speaking, of course, like, it's hard not to see the parallels, right? And if we look at the definition of genocide, which I don't have right here with me, and I'm not going to kind of get into in particular, but there are definite check marks being ticked, right? By that situation, by, you know, the isolation of individuals, the separating of families, and this very willful attempt to destroy culture and to assimilate people into a dominant culture. So it's definitely cause for concern. And it is something that the museum is paying close attention to as part of our mandate to, you know, to stay aware of situations of mass violence or emerging genocide around the world. So yeah, it's definitely one of the contemporary situations that is of great concern.
Thanks for your response. I have one yes for your actually question. So
okay, so
somebody must have used in the classroom.
Someone's done it. Okay. So in case for folks who haven't, if in case there are some of you here, I think a hallmark, I guess, of the Montreal Holocaust Museum's educational work is does lie in testimony and in this this bank of oral histories that we have. So right now we're so fortunate that we have survivors still with us and able to share their stories, as I was mentioning earlier. But of course, we have also recorded hundreds and hundreds of their testimonies so that we have them available in perpetuity, because testimony for us is, it is a key entry point into understanding history and into telling the story of those who've experienced it, and not just, you know, the capital H history of dates and geographies and government decisions and the big movements, right? It's about the texture and the reality and the lived experience of those who were there and who it impacted and changed their lives, right? So so that's how we always position testimony, as this key primary source. And we really encourage you to use it. And we do actually have a whole resource about using testimony in the classroom to teach about the Holocaust, but it really applies to all forms of testimony and all situations that you want to address. So I welcome you to look that up too on our website. So to get into our testimonies, we're going to hear from these two survivors, and fingers crossed all the technical side of things work. Just a quick note, Paul Herczeg's testimony was recorded 62 years after the Holocaust. And he's been presenting his story to the public for many years. He actually passed away earlier this year. And so, so it's kind of an honor to be sharing this tool with all of you. It's the first time that we're presenting it since his passing. So we thank him for all of his contributions to Holocaust education and his real devotion to, you know, and his commitment to sharing his story and his message with youth and with the school children. And then on the other side, Yasmin Ullah's testimony was recorded during a Skype conversation. So it's actually just an audio track with a photo of her. And this was in 2018. So this is while the crisis in Myanmar was still unfolding, right? And this is her first testimony about her family's experiences. So as you can imagine, you'll notice differences in the way that these two people are relating their stories and the way that they're talking about them because of these really key differences in their relationship to giving testimony. So I am going to just tell you a little bit about Paul before we jump into his video. So he was born in 1930 in Hungary. His parents were proud Hungarians and traditional Jews, and he was very involved in the Jewish Boy Scouts Association and in sports and cultural activities at school. When Nazi Germany invaded Hungary in March 1944, Paul and his family were forced to wear a yellow star. Later on, they were forced to move into the Újpest ghetto, which is the city that they lived in. And then in 1944, in July of that year, Paul and his parents were forced into cattle cars and deported to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. His mother was murdered in Auschwitz, but he and his father were spared and transported to another small camp where they worked as slave laborers, where his father died from overwork and starvation. But he was sent to the camp kitchen, which he credits with his survival, because there was some heating in the building, and he saved the potato peels that were designated for pig rations under his clothes and managed to eat them, and he credits them with saving his life. So he moved to Canada in 1948 through the War Orphans Project, and he was a founding member of our museum and was very involved in educational initiatives. So I am going to do my best to play this video. Catherine, you can let me know if things are working. I'm gonna have to stop sharing this screen and then reshare the video. So just bear with me, everyone. If anyone has questions too, you can send them along during this time.
Actually, the video is not playing.
No, I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint and then I'm going to share the video window. Yeah, it's not embedded. I'm not that advanced technologically. Just a sec, folks. Okay, we can see the video now.
It's not playing, but the video's there.
The video's up. Okay, I'll start it now.
Your family were proud Hungarians.
Proud Hungarians, not just that, more than proud Hungarians. I was taught, especially my father was the Hungarian army, of course. My mother was a secular and Hungarian poetry. She was very well versed in poetry, literature. Everybody, every young man under age of 18 before he had to go to the army, once a week, every Wednesday or Tuesday afternoon, had to report to a school where we got training as soldiers, marching.
This included you as well?
Including everybody.
Okay.
And that is the year they separated the Jews from the Gentiles. They took us out to a different place, put on a yellow armband, and they took us here, went out to a place they had to get a wheelbarrow, a shovel, shovel sand or earth into a wheelbarrow, take it to another. Then next week, bring it back. From that moment on, things start to go very fast. Situation developed daily proclamations, laws, what we can or we cannot do. Didn't take very long. 2 weeks after edict comes out, I may be off a week or two. I cannot give you exact dates.
Yeah.
But very short time, every Jew must wear a yellow star. This is the first time I realized that I'm different, even amongst my friends. So by then we didn't allow to go to school to begin with. Okay, we had to stay home. I remember the first time I had to put on the yellow star, go out on the street, and my mother sewed up. I went out. I came back crying like a baby. And I remember my mother hugging me and trying to calm me down. That's the first instance in my life, in my experience, in my mind, that I recognize that I'm in trouble. I'm different. I'm not the same. I walked out maybe for an hour, but evidently I must have done something to hide it more or less. I don't remember exactly, but I'm just thinking back what I would have done at that time that you hide it. You don't want to be so.
And you saw other people that had it on.
So I came, but not that many people on the street. Evidently, everybody was not trying not to go out. And see, don't forget, this is not a ghetto. It's not the Jews, the Gentile section, Jews immersed in them. So the life was going on. And maybe Jews, the first day, they want to go out. I don't remember seeing too many people. But I went for about an hour and came home crying. And that was, till this day, one of the hardest time in my life, if I remember. A very, very traumatic experience.
Okay, I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint again. Just give me a second, folks. Okay. Let me just see, is there some, oops. Are there any questions, or Catherine, tout est beau?
Yes, everything is fine. No question yet.
Okay. Okay, great. I just need the reassurance. You know, it's so disembodied that it's just nice to know everything is going smoothly. Okay, so so we're going to move on to our second testimony. So this is, as you can see, a testimony from Yasmin Ullah, who was born in 1992 to Rohingya parents in Butidown in Myanmar. At the age of 3, Yasmin and her parents were forced to flee Myanmar due to the increasing hate, persecutions, and human rights violations that the Rohingya of Myanmar were subjected to. And we heard about that a little bit before. They fled to Thailand, and there Yasmin and her family were stateless, which means that they didn't have the protection of any kind of national citizenship, and they faced constant threats of deportation. When Yasmin was 4 years old, her brother was diagnosed with severe autism. This made things even more difficult for the family, as there were very limited resources available, as you can imagine, for stateless children with autism. Yasmin recalls fleeing with her mother and younger brother from one town to another to avoid being caught by police and immigration officers. When Yasmin was 19 years old, her father met two Canadian missionaries who had heard him speaking about the persecution of Rohingya and who offered to help him come to Canada with his family. There were many obstacles to this process, of course, because the family was stateless. So after spending several days in a detention center, they finally acquired exit permits and they came to Canada as refugees in 2011. And Yasmin has been actively involved in raising awareness about the human rights crisis facing the Rohingya in Myanmar, as well as the rights of people with disabilities. So she has served as president of the Rohingya Human Rights Network and as co-director of HAMDA, which is an organization that works to make places of worship more accessible to people with disabilities. So I'm so sorry, we're gonna have to go through that little rigmarole again of me sharing this testimony, but bear with me, thank you. Okay. Here we go. Let me know if something is not working.
Sounds good.
Everyone in my family, except for probably my great aunt who's passed away, everyone else in my mom's family, my uncle, everybody else, have no Burmese ID. They were born after 82. Later generations would not have the Burmese ID, which is the national registration card.
Sorry, I just wanted to interrupt just to be clear. Myanmar is formerly known as Burma, so that's why she's talking about Burmese ID. I don't know if I had mentioned that earlier.
Were not able to acquire it, even though my grandmother had the national registration card. My aunts and uncles, including my mom, should automatically become, a citizen of Burma. But that's not applied here, even though it's applied to, majority of the Burmese people, including other ethnic minorities. And so we have this generation of people who just don't have the IDs and are not able to go to school. My grandmother had the ID forced out of her hand in 2012 or 2013 when the raid happened. From my personal experience of my family having the ID taken away, is that not only that my grandmother had her citizenship reversed in a way, even though her parents, her grandparents, her great-grandparents were there, have been Burmese for the longest time. There's no more generations after her that would be Burmese. Not even me. Even though I have the birth certificate, it would mean nothing to them. The same way that, my dad was arrested many times when he was inside Burma. Because if you pride yourself as a Rohingya and you have a Muslim name, you look a certain way, the abuse on a daily basis is that any checkpoints you passed, they will ask you, are you a Rohingya? And if you say yes, that's it. You can be subjected to, kidnapping. That's worst case scenario. You can be killed. You can be beaten. You can be robbed. Being a Rohingya itself is a crime, it seems, because there were so many different kind of IDs forced on us. After the 82 law, it was changed to a pink card, and then it was changed to a white card. But then later on, it was changed to national verification card. You are no longer allowed to use that to go to school, to access any government services, and vote. My grandmother was forced the latest version of it, which is the national verification card, which writes, Bengali Muslim. And the word Bengali is a derogatory term in that the Burmese people use in order to basically alienate and marginalize Rohingya, saying that, well, you don't belong here, you're not from here anyway. Telling us that we are Bengali and Muslim limit us to just those two things. They are not allowing us the opportunity to be more than illegal, alien, Bengali, Muslim. And because we're Muslim, the rest of the country are Buddhist, it sort of, sow the seeds of like, oh my God, you're different. If you're deemed different or your culture is different, where, the difference itself does not really exist, you are pushed aside, you are deemed unworthy, you are deemed, unimportant to talk to. This is a way they actually ensure that the alienation happens. It's indoctrinated into my head that, being a Rohingya is so wrong. You can never admit that you're a Rohingya. Being a Rohingya will bring you harm, so you can never admit it that you're a Rohingya. I was already labeled since I was born that I was part of the group that is not worthy to be living on this earth with anyone else's.
There's some question for you, Monique.
Yes, let's hear them.
The record testimony are great. Is it getting harder to find living Holocaust survivors that are willing or able to share their story, or that population is ageist?
Yeah, certainly. Certainly that is like a big concern that we're faced with right now as the population, as our Holocaust survivor population is aging and we're losing more and more of them. I think, there are some folks who haven't shared their testimony yet and who maybe, later on in life are feel the urge to do so. And so we're always looking for new testimonies from survivors who want to share them. But I think, it's less busy now than it was maybe, 5-10 years ago. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know for sure. But yeah, certainly there is this transition that's happening. Mm-hmm.
Okay, another question said, do you know if Paul Herzeg ever visit Winnipeg?
Oh gosh, I really don't. But I'd be happy if you want to send your email address. I'm actually going to send a sign-up sheet through Catherine to all of you if anyone wants to sign up for our teacher newsletter. But if you if you put your email address in there, you could add a little note, like just in your name. I can check with our remembrance coordinator, who's the person who works directly with the survivors and organizes all of the testimonies, and she would know. Yeah. I've only been at the museum for 3 years, so not in the time that I've been there that I'm aware of, but for sure it's possible, yeah.
Okay, and someone asked if the PowerPoint is going to be available.
Oh, good question. Probably, yeah. I'll look into that and see what we can make available for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? So you can, Katrina, feel free to interrupt me as they come in. I'll just carry on a little bit since I know we're approaching our end time. We have 5 minutes left. But I just wanted to mention, 3, okay, we've got different clocks. I will speak quickly. So basically what I wanted to point out is that these 2 testimonies, they are part of our Us for System resource. And these are some of the questions that we have students working on to kind of compare both of the testimony. And you'll find all of these questions in the downloadable resource. And I will show you, so this is just how we bring them together and how we bring together the question of the violation of human rights as a result of othering. So we also do an artifact analysis in the Us versus Them tool. So students work on the yellow star and then on this white card, this piece of identification as well. So if you want to download the tool, you go to our website here, you go to the education menu, and if you click on secondary education, and not virtual school programs as is highlighted here, but secondary education, you will see these educational programs here, and right up there in the left corner is Us versus Them. You'll click on it and you can download the whole tool, which includes the historical information that I presented earlier, and it includes 4 different lesson plans. One looking at the concept of othering, one looking at the artifacts, one that looks at the testimonies. Oh gosh, maybe it's more than 4. There's also a timeline activity that allows students to examine the different anti-Jewish and anti-Rohingya laws that are implemented. And then finally, there's a call to action exercise at the end that invites students to look at an example of othering in their community. You know, national community or school community can be, you can really play with that scale, and invites them to poser un geste, as we say in French, to do something to address it. So to wrap up, you know, how do we recognize othering, right? Not long before the Nazi government passed the laws that officially targeted Jews, they used propaganda to spread false and insulting anti-Semitic stereotypes about Jews. And this circulation of hateful and divisive ideas is a kind of social othering that can really set the stage for more violent acts. If these othering opinions spread unchallenged, they are more likely to be accepted as normal or true. And then it becomes even easier for governments and other groups to enact repressive laws or to take violent action against the people who have been othered. So othering can be carried out by governments, of course, as in the case of the Nazis forcing the Jews to wear the yellow stars, or Myanmar declaring Rohingya to be non-citizen. But not all othering is obviously violent or repressive, though. And so not all othering will lead to genocide, but almost all human rights violations are rooted in othering. So understanding and identifying the process of othering is an important first step in stopping it. So thank you for being here today, for thinking about these really vitally important questions that feel so relevant right now in this specific historical moment. And thank you for working on this with your students. And I'm here for questions if you like, and I will attempt to send that little sign-up list to Catherine.
Merci Monique. Merci beaucoup Monique pour cette présentation. J'ai des questions ici. Si à Montréal,
oui, en anglais ou français, j'ai oublié de dire.
OK. Yes. Est-ce qu'il y a des testimonies des réfugiés rwandais de 1994?
Ah, excellente question. C'est quoi? Je suis certaine que oui, on a déjà organisé. Maybe I should be answering in English because the translation is to French. Is that it? I don't know how the translation works. So are there any Rwandan testimonies in Montreal? I know that we work closely with the Rwandan community. We've collaborated with them before, and they have given testimony at some of our joint events before. So I'm not sure how they work with testimony, but it's certainly something that has happened. And if folks are interested, yeah, you can let me know, and we can share that information. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my link so that folks can sign up for our newsletter if they want to stay in touch or something. Okay. Sorry, here it is. Coming back to you. Sorry, there's so many windows open here. Okay. So this is a link that Catherine can forward to you if anyone wants to sign up for a teacher newsletter or to get in touch. You can feel free to just email the museum as well with any of these questions.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous.
Merci tout le monde. Thank you. Merci d'avoir été là.
Parfait. Merci, merci Monique.
Merci.
Je vous enverrai un courriel avec les questions qui restent pour les réponses.
OK, c'est parfait. Ça me fait plaisir.
Merci.
Okay, merci.